So thanks for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I'm very honored to be here and to be a part of this workshop. Hello, everyone out there. I'm from the Maritimes. Looks like, according to the poll, there's only 3% of us represented, so we're a minority, but I suppose that's okay. And I'm in St. John, New Brunswick, by the way. And I've been living here for quite a long time. I have 3 adult children. Lisa and I have been married for, well, 40 years and a couple days. Can't believe it. And we're suffering under the quarantine, I'm sure, as many of you are as well, and being closeted up in our house and trying to figure out ways to stay sane. And I hope you all are doing well and are all healthy right now. And it's a pleasure to meet you all. So again, thanks for having me, and I really feel honored to be welcomed here and to be able to share a little bit of my story, how I got to be where I am, and how I became a friend, and some consider me an ally to the LGBTQ community. And I'm also going to share some of my cartoons. So I hope you enjoy that. And I think it's part of I think somebody put out a poll, how many of you are familiar with my work? So it'd be kind of cool to see how many of you have come across Naked Pastor cartoons. And that would be really neat to know. I'm familiar. Oh, I just got the poll here. Am I familiar with my work? Yes, I am. There we go. I'm going to submit that. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up pretty religious in the Christian church. My family, we went through all kinds of different denominations, probably because we just went to the closest church that we liked, and ended up getting born again as a teenager in a Baptist church. And then we switched to Pentecostal in Canada, and I went to a Pentecostal Bible college. That's where I met my wife, Lisa, and we got married. I went to Gordon-Conwell Theological Seminary. Long story short, I ended up getting ordained in the Presbyterian Church in Canada. And then from there, I eventually made my way into the Vineyard Church. Maybe some of you have heard of the Vineyard movement. And I pastored a Vineyard Church until I left the ministry in 2010. And I left the church as a regular member. I visited churches now and then, but I left the church as a regular member in 2010. Actually 10 years ago in March. So that's my story in a nutshell. How I started blogging, The Naked Pastor, in about 2005. Oh, wow. Over half of you aren't familiar. So surprise, here I am, and welcome to my world. You welcome me into mine, I'll welcome you. You welcome me into yours, I'm welcoming you into mine. So 52% said you're not familiar with my work. So, and I don't feel bad about that at all. I don't feel sensitive about that at all. Because it's funny, just the other day I met somebody and we were talking from a distance, safe distance. And they came to find out I was the Naked Pastor, and like, you're the Naked Pastor. So some people know my work and don't know me, don't realize it's me. And some people know me, don't realize what my work is and all that kind of thing. So I started blogging in 2005, 2006, I started cartooning. And I'm going to get into a little bit later why I continued cartooning. But I was an artist before. I did paintings and things, but I kind of challenged myself. Why don't I try cartooning to convey my messages? And I had the blog Naked Pastor. And the reason why I use that name, Naked Pastor, is I was a pastor at the time. It's about me just being honest, raw, and real, vulnerable, transparent, unadorned. That's what the naked means. Totally PG. And so Naked Pastor, I wanted people to see what the real life of a pastor was, to be able to pull back the curtain and see the real life struggles of a real pastor. I wanted to be completely honest. Therefore, I used the name Naked Pastor. I wanted them to see my struggles and my joys and my doubts and my fears and questions and, all those things. And it became, I don't know, kind of edgy, controversial, because people aren't used to pastors speaking the truth about their own personal experiences and their weaknesses and struggles and so on. And I found my cartoons were a really quick way to communicate what I was trying to communicate. And I just found, I used to draw many frames and stuff like that. And I found the most effective way for me to communicate is in one frame, just one frame, one picture, and try to communicate in that one frame what I'm trying to get across. And I found it was very effective. Rather than somebody reading 1,000-word blog post, if they could see my cartoon in an instant, then and I could communicate what I was trying to communicate. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So I save people a lot of time reading, and I communicate what I want to communicate in just one frame. And I found it just a very powerful medium for communication, also for delivering some humor, some radical stuff, offensive stuff, controversial stuff. And so what's really cool about it is, especially with some of my LGBTQ cartoons, is that you can't unsee it. It's too soon. Like if you start reading a post of mine and you can start seeing that I'm being affirming to LGBTQ folk, you can just stop reading it and say, oh, I don't agree with that, and move on. Whereas if you see one of my cartoons, it's too late. You've already seen it. It's too late. It's already in your head and you can't unsee it. And I just love the power and the speed of that kind of communication. So I'm looking at a screen. I can't hear you laughing your heads off, or I can't hear you disagreeing with me, or I can't see you raising your hands, although you can raise your hands on this app. But if you have any question, you're laughing. Hi, Kate. Nice to see you. Well, I can't see you. Nice to see your chat. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to ask. Rather than me just sitting here giving you a monologue, I really, really love the interaction of questions and answers. So if you have any questions for me or any comments or anything, please feel free to mention it in the chat, and I'll break off what I'm saying or doing and answer that question. So that would be really cool. And I'd appreciate that, because it just makes it seem more real and more authentic and more relational, which I'm more into, rather than, monologue kind of speeches. And even when I was a preacher, pastor in a church, I would get down off the podium and off the stage, and I would stand among the people, and we'd have discussions. I just prefer it that way. It just seems more human. That's my own personal preference. Now, when Pam and I were talking last week about doing this, I admitted to her, I confessed to her my nervousness, because I am aware that I'm not a marginalized person. And I am a person of, I have privileges that some of you don't have or don't experience. And, I'm a straight white guy, and I'm very much aware of that, and I'm very, very sensitive to that. And I can't help but be, I can't help but be aware of my privilege, but also sometimes I act out of that privilege. I'm aware of that. And if I ever do that, please point that out and correct me. I'm doing my best to be completely aware of, who I am in this group. And I just want to really, really honor that with all humility. And I, again, appreciate you allowing me to be in the space with you to share my stuff.
Hey, David.
Hi, Pam.
speaking of questions, there's a couple that came up. So if
Oh,
you're okay,
great.
I'm just going to jump in and ask. Shiloh and I will probably be doing this. So
Good.
one question that we have is, what impact have your cartoons had on other pastors, and how do they react?
That's such a good question because what happens a lot is I hear from pastors privately. They say, I just want you to know I really loved your cartoon today, and it's really, it's really means a lot to me. They might want to buy one of my prints of the cartoon or whatever, but a lot of it's private because they are in a situation where they don't feel that they have whatever it takes to come out as a affirming pastor, or that their church is not yet affirming, or whatever. So that's what I hear most often about. And another kind of response, doesn't happen as much, but it does happen, is I hear from pastors who at first, maybe years ago, were really, really opposed and against my cartoons and hated me. And now some of them are my best friends, and because they came around, their eyes were opened, and and maybe even they came out themselves. So it's really, really remarkable, the impact my cartoons have, and the impact and the responses right across the board, from absolute visceral hatred to real love and appreciation for my cartoons and everything in between. And so it's almost like, this is why I love the cartoons so much. It's almost like people can't say, "Meh, he's just doing his stupid thing off in the corner of the world," and try to ignore it. It's almost like they demand a response of some kind, and that's why I really love the power of the cartoon. So yeah, I do hear from a lot of pastors. And you say you had another one?
Yeah, we have one more right now. So
Okay.
Denise is asking, can you talk about what the circumstances under which you left the church?
Yes, I was going to get to that, but yeah, I can do that now. I just felt I came to the place where I always gravitated to churches where I felt I could grow. I had permission to grow, space to grow. Even in the last church I was in, the Vineyard, I'd been in all kinds of churches, including Presbyterian, as I said. I was ordained Presbyterian, but I ended up in the Vineyard. And the particular Vineyard church I was in was very open, and very, I felt I had unlimited space to grow. Excuse me. But we got to a point where I suddenly started to become aware that I was getting close to the edge of the box that I was in. And part of that was I was coming out more and more as a friend to the LGBTQ community, and I was doing more and more cartoons in relationship to the LGBTQ community. And as many of you might know, some of you might not, but the Canadian Association of Vineyard Churches just 2 weeks ago voted to not be affirming. They actually voted to not be affirming and not to recognize same-sex couples or marriages, and to stick to the traditional Orthodox, what they would call biblical view, that marriage is only between one man and one woman. And so I was doing these cartoons and starting to push the boundaries of the envelope in 2009, and starting to, in my blog, being more and more honest, and more people were starting to notice, until it got to the point where a meeting was requested, and we all know what happens when we're invited to a church meeting. And that at that meeting I realized my time was up. And Lisa, my wife, was working at the time as a nurse, and I texted her. I said, "Honey, I'm done." And she goes, "Yeah, me too." And we, within a month, we were gone, because there was no longer any room to grow. And what was really empowering about that step I made was I always, as I said before, I always found churches gave me more and more room to grow, a bigger box, so to speak. And when I left the church, I realized, hey, I don't need a box. I'm done. I don't need a box. Unlimited. I'm unlimited growth now. I'm spiritually independent, as I say, and I can be the master of my own ship, the captain of my own ship, and the master of my own destiny. And that happened in 2010. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have one more, and
Okay.
and then I might, after this question, I might let you get into some other stuff, and we could save the
Sure.
questions for a couple minutes.
Sure.
So this question is from Elizabeth, and she asked, since you left the church, in quotes, where and how have you found faith-filled based community? What about worship, communion? Have you found ways to share communal ritual and sacrament?
Hmm. So, thank you, Elizabeth, for that question. As I said, when I left the church as a regular member in 2010. I left as pastor, the ministry, and I left the church, and my wife did too. Now, I come from St. John. I live in St. John, around St. John, and I guess I kind of have a little bit of a reputation locally. So I found it very difficult to feel safe going anywhere else. And I tried going other places. Lisa and I did. We even tried going back to the same church we left because it was an amicable divorce that we had, and we thought we might be able to do that. But no, that wasn't going to work either. And then we are friends with a vineyard that's about an hour and a half drive from us in St. Stephen, New Brunswick. You might have heard, maybe if any of you are following the vineyard story, they were a vineyard church, and when the vineyard voted to not be affirming, they actually were required to leave the vineyard. And so they were told to make a choice, either follow the vineyard rules or leave. And so they chose, obviously, to keep their integrity and what they believe in. They left the vineyard. So that's one church where Lisa and I will go and visit. And we really do love it there. We love the pastor, Peter Fitch, and his wife, Mary Ellen. And the community there is just fantastic. Maybe some people here in this workshop have heard of the St. Croix now. I'm not sure what their new name is, but it's not St. Croix Vineyard anymore. And just a really cool place where you can go in. And yeah, they have Eucharist every Sunday, I think. And when Lisa and I have the time, she works shift work as a nurse. When we have the time, we'll go down for the weekend and attend there. And it's really cool because it's just very laid back. There's no pressure to be or believe or do anything, and you just feel the freedom, and you don't feel like you're being coerced or manipulated. And so it's just really cool, and the people there are awesome. So that's one place where we'll go visit. Yeah. So it is, and I'm assuming Pam, there's no questions right now. So I'll just continue where I left off. And if there's any more questions, please feel free to ask the question. In fact, I'm just going to take a sip of water. This church I was just talking to you about in St. Stephen, New Brunswick, asked me to come preach one Sunday. This was last year. And I got a whole sermon prepared, and I thought it was going to be really good. And when I got there and I was told them I was getting ready to prepare, they were all like, "Oh, we want you to share your cartoons. Please show us your cartoons." It's like, but my sermon, they said, "No, we want to see your cartoons. Talk about your cartoons." So it's kind of the same here today. I could come all prepared with a text and read my text or share this or that or the other thing, when in fact, my cartoons say a lot, and they really are what Naked Pastor is known for mostly. I do write, for sure. I write posts. I have books on Amazon and all that, but my main language is cartoons. And so I thought I would just share them with you now. I'll share a few of them. I've got a bunch. And if anybody has any questions about any of the cartoons I'm sharing, just please raise your hand. Also, I'd like to know, Pam, if we could find out if there are any blind people taking part in this workshop. If that is so, if there are any blind people, this could have been a poll question, actually. I should have thought of that. If there's any blind people participating in this workshop, let me know and I'll describe the cartoon.
Absolutely. So if that's the case, then any of those folks who may have limited vision, please just write us in the Q&A and we'll make sure to let you know.
Yeah, so any limited vision folks, please just let me know and I'll describe the cartoon. That's something I'm trying to learn on my social media accounts is I have a few limited vision people who have said, could you please describe the content of the cartoon? Because sometimes the descriptions that Facebook or whatever provides just completely doesn't make sense. So I try to do that now in each of my cartoons. So I'm just going to start sharing. This is one of the very first cartoons that I drew. As you can see, it's back in 2012. I actually had some ones I had posted before I left the ministry, but they're older and I didn't like them as much. But this was one of the first ones that really stirred people up. And it shows a man and Jesus walking hand in hand. And the man says, sorry, Jesus, but I think I'm gay. And Jesus says, dude, relax. I knew that long before you did. And the reason why I like this cartoon and why a lot of people like this cartoon, and this is one example where, excuse me. Oh, sorry. I need to share screen. I'm so sorry. Here we go. There we go. Sharing my screen. So, the reason why, this is an example of why a cartoon is so powerful, in my opinion, is because somebody sees it on social media or whatever, and it happens so quickly within 1 second or 2 seconds. Somebody sees the cartoon and it's like it's too late. It's in your head and you can't get it out. I mean, it's just something that it just moves so quickly. And so rather than me writing a whole post about, let's say if you believe in Jesus or if you don't, the point is that Jesus is not upset by the revelation to yourself that you're gay, because it's not a revelation to Jesus. That's the point of the cartoon, and that implied in him holding hands is that there's love there and acceptance and no fear or hesitation or caution. So that's one reason why I love that cartoon. It's one of the first ones that really started making its way around. And let me see, can I see when, Pam, can you, do you break in on my screen if I'm sharing a screen? If there's
Yeah, I can if I need to, for sure.
Okay, great. So I'll just continue showing some cartoons then. Here we go. There. And this one, I'm just going to assume there might be limited vision people, and I'm just going to describe them because it doesn't take long anyway. There's a whole bunch of people marching with placards, and all their signs say gay or Christian, like you have to make a choice. And there's one in the midst of them. See, I'm even laughing, and I drew the thing. He's crossed out or, and it just says gay Christian. So I think that's pretty cool. I like how, and I get all kinds of reactions from this cartoon. People hate it because there's people who just don't believe it's possible for there to be a gay Christian. And then on the other side, it's very affirming for people who actually are gay Christians. And I know many, I'm friends with many. And so, and the looks on the faces of the people, they're very annoyed and upset looking over at this guy who's got a big smile on his face, carrying the sign with the or crossed out. Here's another one, one of my popular ones. Now, this one came out before I left the ministry. Yeah, that's right. This one came out before I left the ministry. And this was upsetting to people. So it shows 6 characters, and the title of it is Some Heroes of the Faith. And the first one's Abraham, came out of Ur, the city, his hometown. Moses came out of Egypt. David came out to face Goliath. Daniel came out of the lion's den. Jesus came out of the tomb. And Pat came out of the closet. I love that one because you see what I've done there is I've included Pat amongst the biblical heroes. And, that's, I have a lot of friends who just love this one. In fact, I have a few friends who are gay who asked me, could you please change the name Pat to Pam or something, or whatever their names are, and make it personal for me. I'm like, sure, I can do that with Photoshop. So I would do that for them. And then, of course, you have other people who are angry that I would include someone coming out of the closet with other biblical heroes. Does anyone, I'm going to ask a trick question. Is there anything wrong with this cartoon? Is there anything missing? Anybody? I'll give a few seconds. If not, I'm going to reveal the secret. Is there anything missing in this cartoon that I need to fix?
So I'm just going to jump in. You can't see me, but I'm the voice.
Okay.
So I'll just say a couple of the comments that came in.
All right.
Where's the
Sorry,
women?
can I interrupt for a second? This is the live captioner. Can you say your name first before you speak?
Absolutely. Sorry about that. So this is Pam. And so we have women heroes of the faith. I would love to see a woman as a biblical hero. It's very male.
Yeah.
They're all
problem.
Christian.
Yeah.
Rainbows are missing.
Yeah. No, the big one is they're all male. Yeah, that's the big one. So I made Pat that could go either way or any way. But there are female heroes in the Bible. So I need to increase the frames or replace the frames. So very good. Did you come up with that, Pam, or did somebody else come up with that?
This is Pam.
Yeah.
There were lots of people who wrote that. About 20 people wrote in.
Oh, good. I feel so chastised in a good way. So that's great. Thanks, my friends. I appreciate that very much. But yeah, definitely. So this is another one that I like that upsets people or makes people laugh. There's a man standing at the pearly gates. St. Peter's there, and it looks like there's a big party going on in heaven with a big rainbow. And the guy says, I'm not going in there with all those homosexuals. And then Peter says, who said you were going in there? Of course, tongue in cheek. I just think it's funny. The presumptions, just attacking the presumptions that people can make. And I deal with it every day, where even this morning, I posted a cartoon, which maybe I'll show you a bit later. It's on the list, but if we get to it. And, I got people coming at me about, gay people can't go to heaven or whatever. And which, of course, is nonsense and I don't believe. But, I have to deal with that every day. But I'm just getting attacked for my ideas, not my identity. That's a huge difference, and I'm aware of that.
David Shiloh here. I have some questions.
Sure.
So 2 people asked a similar question. First one is, Are your cartoons available to repost in church newsletters or bulletins? And the next question is similar, just asking what are the rules around sharing your cartoons?
Okay, so I do definitely have rules. One rule is please don't change them unless I give you permission. So I do have people, for example, I didn't realize this until a few months ago, but the most popular city for Naked Pastor in the world is Sao Paulo, Brazil, and which is very, very cool. Naked Pastor is very popular in South America, which is pretty conservative, either Catholic or very evangelical conservative. But there's a huge following for Naked Pastor down there in my cartoons. So they want it translated into Portuguese or Spanish. And I say, by all means, online sharing is all free. Please share away and on any social media platform, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or what am I missing? You know, Pinterest, whatever it is you're using, go ahead and share online. Just please at me, tag me. That's all I ask. Now, on my Naked Pastor site, there's a licensing. Under cartoons, there's licensing where churches can pay a very small, very minimal fee. And you can use all my cartoons in any of your presentations and your brochures and your bulletins, or even post them in your lobby or whatever you want to do. So that's available for, or if you're a publisher or an author, there's licensing there for that as well. So yeah, please share my cartoons. If it's online for free or in your blog post or whatever for free, go ahead. But if you're going to use it in printing or anything like that, then there's very, very minimal licensing fee. I'm the cheapest out there, I'm sure. And I have thousands of cartoons. So if you want to use them, they're available to download. Yeah. Okay, we'll just keep trucking through. How's that? It's already after, oh man, we're moving along here. This one I love. It's a Christmas one, very popular. Merry Christmas, everybody. And it shows the rainbow, the Star of Bethlehem, and it's showering a rainbow down on the nativity scene, and splashing color everywhere over the camels and donkeys and wise men and Mary and Joseph and the sheep, and that's a very popular one around Christmas time. This was way back in 2013. I think this was my first sheep, LGBTQ rainbow sheep cartoon, which have become very popular. This one shows a rainbow sheep turning around, looking at a flock of white sheep, and they're saying, sorry, but we don't do different. And, you know, the sheep that's being marginalized and rejected could be a black sheep, or, you know, an old sheep, or a radical sheep, or, you know, any other kind of sheep. But it's basically, what I'm challenging by this cartoon is the temptation for churches to be homogenous, to everybody to be the same. And I think my own personal experience as a pastor and as somebody who facilitates an online community, the Lasting Supper, diversity is what makes a community rich. So the more diversity there is, the richer the community experience will be. So that's why I did this cartoon, challenging the homogeneity of so many churches rather than celebrating diversity. And here's another one, Jesus dying on the cross with the rainbow colors coming out of his side where he's bleeding. A lot of people like that one. I think I had it on a t-shirt for a while, and a lot of people loved it. So yeah. Oh, this one I did in 2014. This is a picture of Jesus riding a surfboard on a rainbow wave. The reason I did this was because of a conservative preacher, I can't remember exactly who it was now, was warning the church of the wave of gay theology that was coming. And so I thought, oh, a wave of gay theology. Of course, being an artist, I could picture a wave of gay theology. So I drew a wave of gay theology and Jesus riding it on his surfboard. Hang 10, Jesus. Did I see a question pop up? Anybody have a question or comment? Okay. Good.
Shiloh here. We have one comment saying from Elizabeth, they really appreciate your awareness and sensitivity.
My awareness, what?
And sensitivity.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm trying. I do make mistakes, and I love being educated. So I really do appreciate that. Thanks, Elizabeth. Now, here's one where we're getting into what I think is one of the major issues, and this is what expresses an experience that I had. I used to see, for me, I lived in theory. I lived in theory for a while. I used to be, when I was much younger, being gay is a sin, living gay is a sin, certainly. And then I moved to love the sinner, hate the sin place. But it was during this time, love the sinner, hate the sin, which by the way, I don't believe that now. I'm just sharing my story. This is from years and years ago while I was still a pastor. And Lisa and I met friends from seminary at a hotel and in another place far, far away. We did a weekend. And in the evening after supper, or at supper, actually, our friends I was with, we were talking about the reality of LGBTQ at the time, gay people. And I was like, yeah, I love the sinner, hate the sin. Now at the time I was a pastor, and my friend, they were roommates with a same-sex couple, 2 women, and they were talking about how that just doesn't work. That just doesn't make any sense. Love the sinner, hate the sin. And it really, I found it very, very challenging. And I found my theology getting a little bit challenged. I felt uncomfortable. I didn't know, because, right, I'm living in theory, but here I've met a friend who has friends, and, it starts getting confusing. So after supper, we decided we were going to go to the hot tub. So we filled up our thermos, our insulated mugs with red wine, and we went down to the hot tub, and we were sitting in the hot tub, and a couple of guys joined us, and we were sitting there just talking, and they're like, so what do you guys do? We're just talking, and my friend, he said, at that time he was an editor for a publisher, and he says, what do you do? Looked at me and said, well, I'm a pastor. And immediately one of the guys got up out of the hot tub and went into the swimming pool. And he says, I'm sorry, he's just he has a problem with pastors. And I said, oh, okay, that wasn't news to me. But he said, yeah, we're gay, and we were just kicked out of our church, and we were very active in our congregation. We were kicked out and shunned by the congregation, and they continued to tell me just horror story after horror story of the abuse that they suffered in the small town they were a part of, and even including not being able to get furnace oil delivered to their home by their company when it was found out that they were gay, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's when my theory I knew no longer worked, and that it was a luxury for me to be living in my little bubble of theory, and let's wait and let's figure this out and all that. And that's what motivated this cartoon, was the idea of privileged people waiting until it's clear what's right and what's wrong. And so this cartoon is a picture of a bunch of people in rainbow colored sweaters and coats standing outside freezing cold, and there's a please wait sign there, while inside a nice warm house, well, it's the church, inside this nice warm church, and there's a wood stove, and there's a bunch of men drinking brandy and smoking their cigars, discussing whether it's biblical or not, et cetera, et cetera. And so I wanted to express that in graphic terms. It's a position of privilege and luxury to say we're waiting, we're working on it, we're continuing to talk and blah, 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 while people actually suffer. And I wanted to portray that, and I think I did pretty well in that picture. I have other ones like that. Here's another one, equality for all. There's a gay man, a woman, a person of color, and a Muslim woman waiting in the waiting room. Equality for all, and the sign on the door says, "Please wait, brought to you by the establishment. Thank you." That's just another cartoon with the whole concept of waiting and having to wait to enjoy full privileges of a community. This one is a person praying before a crucifix. Please, Lord, bring more people into your church. Meanwhile, Jesus is standing with a group of LGBTQ people, and he's looking at his watch, saying, well, basically the message is, here's a whole bunch of people who are waiting to be included, and you're looking for somebody else that looks or thinks or believes or behaves different. How are we doing, Pam? Any other questions there in the lineup, or want me just to keep going?
We have a couple
Or
that will. Yeah, sorry, this is Pam.
Okay.
I'm leaving it to Shiloh. There's a couple of questions that we're sort of waiting a few minutes for, but we will we'll let you know.
All righty. So here's another one with the sheep. People just love my little sheep cartoons. They're so cute, and in one way, the little sheep are so disarming. They're adorable little creatures, but the cartoons can convey very harsh realities. And this is what a lot of my gay friends experience in the church. So I have many gay friends right now who are very, very upset and saddened by the Vineyard's decision to not be affirming. And this is basically what they feel is being communicated to them. It shows a bunch of white sheep inside a corral having fun with a ball, and the rainbow sheep is on the outside wanting to come in. And there's a sheep at the gate, a white sheep at the gate, saying, "Of course we welcome you, you just can't play." And that's the way a lot of my gay friends, my LGBTQ friends, are feeling about the Vineyard right now. And I have a lot of other friends in other denominations who are feeling just this way, that they are, waiting for full privileges and rights that they should have, but they're being held up at the gate, that they're welcomed, but you can't fully participate, you can't play. And here's another one, exactly the same thing. I did this when the Vineyard was deciding to vote, and just talking and talking and talking and talking. I've come to the conclusion. Let me describe the cartoon first. There's 4 frames in this one. The first one is the LGBTQ sheep is standing at the gate, and the white sheep says, "Be patient, we're working on it." And the LGBTQ sheep is standing up. Then the sun starts setting, and the LGBTQ sheep is sitting, waiting to come in. And then the sun is really setting down the horizon, and the LGBTQ sheep is lying down, and the white sheep says, "We're still working on it." And then finally, the sun is set, the moon is up, it's dark, and the LGBTQ sheep has wasted away outside the gate, while the white sheep are safely inside the gate. I just wanted to express my frustration with the Vineyard just talking and talking and talking. And I'm going to just be honest here. I've come to the conclusion that dialogue can be a ploy. And that's the way this felt. And that's what I was trying to communicate was, we're working on it. We're dialoguing. We're having conversation. We're gathering data. It all sounds very genuinely wanting to come to a good answer, but I knew what the conclusion was going to be before it even was announced, and so did everybody else. And it just felt like, there you go, working on it, and we're doing the research, and we're dialoguing, and we're conversing, and we're collecting data, and we will let you know, is actually a privileged position to be in, and it hurts.
David, we have some questions here. It's Shiloh.
Okay.
The first one is from Catherine, just talking about being a little bit of picking at detail. Mm-hmm. But the question is, how do you or we reconcile everyone being welcome, but then some people, such as homophobic people, aren't welcomed? So kind of referencing that cartoon of the
right
gates.
Yeah, so that's always been the problem for millennia. That's the basic political problem. Politicians wrestle with this all the time, and for millennium, philosophers, is everybody's welcome except people who aren't welcoming of everybody. And that's a real problem. That's a real problem that society has. And I came up with a kind of a motto, or a value. I came up with a value for community as a pastor of a local congregation, as well as my online community, The Lasting Supper. And it's basically this: how can I be free without violating your freedom? That is the question for a healthy, functioning community. How can I be healthy without violating your, how can I be free without violating your freedom? And that has to be wrestled with in a community. If a community is wrestling with that, I'll allow you to be free as long as it doesn't violate my freedom. And I can be free as long as it doesn't violate yours. Now, if there's a gay person in a community, they're not violating my freedom at all. But if I believe that the community should be pure and there should be no gay people there, then it's violating the gay person's freedom, right? So that to me is the question, the value that a really healthy community has to wrestle with. And philosophers and political scientists down through the ages have wrestled with this. Is yes, everybody's welcome except people who will not abide by everybody's welcome. You kind of exclude yourself by that measure. Thanks for that question, by the way. Mm-hmm. Good one.
Shiloh again. I have one more that's
okay.
think is really important. So it's saying, I'm a Presbyterian living in Canada. I find myself enormously angry with all the talking, as you say. I'm wondering if you see any hope for the church and have a sense of what it would look like to shake these cigar-smoking old men out of their privilege through talk.
Yeah. Do I have hope for the church? I do. But this is why I draw these cartoons about time, that I want, and waiting and patience, and I want the people who are on the inside making the decisions to realize that it is a luxury. It is a privileged position. To say to somebody who is starving to death, now just wait, we're looking for the best, rice to plant, so that this and that, the other thing. Meanwhile, these people are starving. It's similar for me. So I do have hope, but I still feel there needs to be truth still needs to be spoken to power. There still needs to be prophets out there challenging the church's status quo and their comfort and their privilege and their luxury of being able to, because I'm a straight white guy, and I could very easily be one of those old guys sipping on my brandy and smoking my cigar, discussing theological issues Meanwhile, there's people who are suffering and struggling. And, but that seems to be a huge problem today. I mean, we're seeing it around the world where politicians or church leadership are having all these discussions when actual people are suffering. And it's opening people's eyes to that. And hopefully they'll get a glimpse of the suffering and the pain and feel some empathy. That's what where I think the answer lies. I think I have about 10 minutes left. So I'm just going to, if you have any more questions, please ask them. I'm willing to answer them. I'd love to answer them. But I want to move ahead to a couple of maybe happier ones. Oh, here's my sheep conversion therapy. A lot of people love that, where the white sheep shaves off all the wool from the LGBTQ rainbow sheep, thinking he's going to find a nice pink sheep underneath where it's still a rainbow sheep. You know, so I wanted to address that conversion therapy idea. Yeah, here's one. There's an LGBTQ rainbow sheep at the door of a church, and the white sheep are like, yeah, come on in, welcome. Just put this on before you come in. And it's a white sheep's clothing costume. Here's a bunch where I show Jesus carrying the lost sheep back, returning the lost sheep. And this one is the LGBTQ sheep. Actually, this cartoon has so many iterations, it's hilarious. It started with Jesus just bringing back a white sheep, and the flock of sheep are there, and they're saying, whoa, 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 hold it right there. He wasn't lost, we kicked him out. And then somebody said, could you please do an LGBTQ sheep? And I did that. And so this is the LGBTQ sheep. He wasn't lost, we kicked him out. And then somebody said, can you do the transgender sheep? So I did. This is the first one. Whoa, 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 hold it right there. He wasn't lost, we kicked him out. And Jesus says, I know, and I found her. Notice the pronouns. And then somebody said, oh, could you do it for my friend who's a he? So I changed the words. Whoa, hold it right there. She wasn't lost, we kicked her out. And Jesus says, I know, and I found him. And then somebody said, could you do it with, you know, non-binary? So they're like, we kicked her out, and Jesus says, I know, and I found them. And then kicked him out, I know, and I found them. So that cartoon has gone through so many iterations, it's hilarious. But a lot of people, you know, love the fact that Jesus is carrying this lost sheep back, who's been kicked out, but is bringing them back in. And that's my hope for the church and for authentic community. Here I'm going to, this is an ally friend cartoon where a rainbow sheep is, just looked at my watch just to see my time. Rainbow sheep is sitting, lying on the grass with a white sheep, and the rainbow sheep says, thanks for being my friend. And the white sheep says, thanks for being mine. Just a cute one. This is one I drew for Vicki Beeching. Maybe some of you have heard of her. She used to be a worship leader and came out as gay and immediately lost her worship leading career. Boom, just like that. And so she's written a book called Undivided, and she's been through so much. And as many of you probably understand. And so I drew this cartoon where she's walking with Jesus and her guitar is slung around her back. And she's saying, they say I'm broken because I'm gay. And Jesus says, it's a broken mind that sees people as broken. I don't like that word being used for people. Broken usually means, for many people, different, right? And it's a broken mind that sees people as broken. It's I think, an open mind and a loving mind, a compassionate mind that sees different people as beautiful. I'm for diversity, and I'm serious about that. And then I just drew I just love drawing these pictures of Jesus being happy with a transgender sheep, pushing them on a swing. Jesus riding a bike with a LGBTQ sheep, Jesus, well, the Trinity, the Godhead, in a gay pride parade, in which I attended one down in Dallas, Texas in 2010, which one of the high points of my life. You could feel the love. It was tangible in the air. And then here's a LGBTQ sheep knitting a sweater from its own wool and gives the sweater to Jesus, shows Jesus trying on the sweater at the end. And then here's Jesus and an LGBTQ sheep jumping through a sprinkler. Instead of water, it's a bunch of hearts. And here's Jesus dancing with an LGBTQ sheep. They're just having a lot of fun. Meanwhile, in the background, there's a bunch of white sheep looking very upset. The reason why I like doing these cartoons is, and people, you can't unsee it, right? It takes a split second to see this cartoon and it's over. It's already in your head. You see Jesus dancing with a gay sheep, and it's too late. It's already in your head. And I love the power that that can have in changing people's minds, or unfortunately, sometimes making them more dogmatic. Hopefully it's the first, opening up people's minds. Here's a LGBTQ sheep having their devotions. I love that one because it's just affirming that there can be gay Christians who read their Bible and pray. You know, that's a foreign concept for some people, and it still baffles me that that's still true, but it is. Here's Jesus with a black sheep, a white sheep, and an LGBTQ sheep doing a puzzle together, the shape of a heart. They're eating popcorn and pizza and tacos, and I think there's a bowl of Skittles there, and they're drinking Coke. Maybe there's rum in it, I don't know. And then this one was for the pandemic. Jesus has medical gloves on and a mask, and there's an LGBTQ sheep with medical gloves on and a mask, and Jesus says, hugs. They're from a distance. And then the sheep says, hugs back. Anyway, I thought it was cute. I hope you do too. And then this was one I just did not long ago, just last week, about allyship and friendship to the LGBTQ community. And it's, I would come out and support you publicly, but I've got all these other relationships to consider. And I just wanted to show the tension a lot of people feel, which on the one hand is valid. It's a valid tension that they're feeling, that if they come out as supportive and affirming and a friend or an ally, that they're going to get their own feeling of rejection and marginalization and so on. Of course, it's not the same or the same intensity, but it is a real valid consideration. But also I wanted to encourage people to see that that is actually sometimes the choice. And that, you know, for you to come out, it will mean separating yourself from people who aren't affirming. You know, you'll stand out and set yourself apart. So that's the end of my slideshow, and I think there's a couple minutes left. I'd really appreciate you, you know, hanging out with me. And if anybody has any final question or anything, I'm done, I think.
Awesome. It's Shiloh here. Thank you, David.
Hi, Shiloh.
We have 2 quick questions here.
Okay.
The first one is, do you have any reflections on how to engage a congregation that is rather silent on the affirming process, especially when people feel like they're already there or already welcoming, that kind of stuff?
So I'll share how I did it, was just to speak about grace all the time. I mean, just speak about grace being all-inclusive, and love being all-inclusive, and love and compassion not being picky or choosy. Love is love. Love is like an ocean that just crashes on the beach. It doesn't choose this or that or the other. Love just smothers and drowns everything out. And because that's just what love is. It's not choosy. It doesn't just pick certain privileged people. And so I'd rather use the word love than grace, I guess, because grace assumes like a lot of people believe it takes grace and forgiveness to include LGBTQ people. I don't agree with that. It's just love. Love is love. And if you are claiming to be a loving church, that necessarily means all inclusive. And you had another one, Shiloh?
Yep.
Okay.
So we only have a few minutes left. So if you want to just do a quick sentence to answer this one,
Okay.
please elaborate on why hate the sin, love the sinner doesn't work.
Well, because it's like somebody said, I'll try to do this really quick. Somebody just last week said, you know, we forgive a thief or a murderer, and we can forgive gay people. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're equating gay people to murderer and a thief? This is their identity. This is who they are. They were, let's say, they were born as this kind of identity, this person. You're not born a thief or born a murderer, you know, and this is a behavior that you've chosen to commit and harm people. So that whole love the sinner, hate the sin thing is very, you can't do that. That, like I said before, love is love. It embraces everything. It embraces all. And so that's why that whole saying became bankrupt. It's not even a Christian saying. So, and that's it.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have. We're just going to quickly go on to our break before our next session. That's going to start at 11:45. So thank you, David, for showing us your cartoons and sharing with us Naked Pastor.
Can I just share one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm all across social media as Naked Pastor. My blog is nakedpastor.com and my store with all kinds of stuff. But I'm really, if you reach out to me one-on-one, like through email or through a private message or a direct message or whatever, I'm really good at answering. So feel free to contact me if you want to. Thanks.